Thank you everyone for the warm welcome back to Taipei. Can you hear me correctly on this mic? It's all okay? Good. Well, this is, I think, the third or fourth time I have come here. The third or fourth time I've been speaking about either license compliance or patents. And I'm impressed at how many people still turn up to listen to me for a whole hour on a topic like this. Now, this is a little bit of an informal conference. So today, I'm not just going to give a long 1 hour boring talk. We're going to dig into some cool stuff as well as legal stuff to refresh you, to wake you up after that very tasty lunch we had. First, before we do the really cool stuff, and bear with me, it is genuinely cool, we're going to take a big picture here. Why am I speaking today? Well, I'm speaking because Linux, open source, is very important. It's mainstream technology. We all need it. Patents are also a very important concern in the technology industry, whether you do hardware or software. What we have to do is find a way for open source technologies and for patenting to coexist. Open Invention Network is an organization dedicated to protecting Linux, to protecting open source and open innovation. We're here to try to bridge the possible tension between what we see in open source and what we see in the traditional approach to patents. It's a big issue, it's well worth thinking about, and it needs a lot of work and a lot of resources to address. Open Invention Network has a lot of resources. You can see its founders on the bottom of the screen: IBM, NEC, Novell, Philips, Red Hat, and Sony. It has a community that's very, very large now, around 450 participants, including enormous global companies like, for example, LG Electronics and Fujitsu. What we're trying to do, we're trying to make sure that everyone, whether they're a big company or a small project, is able to keep doing Linux, keep collaborating, and keep the energy that we find so valuable. All right, so the reality. Open source is the most important thing, like, ever. It's a super important way to do software that creates almost unmeasurable value for everyone who does it. It's a collaborative way to create, and by doing that, we get everything done faster and better than ever before. So open source is perhaps the most important post-industrial idea. It's the thing that defines the value in the post-industry market situation. Anyone with any motive can collaborate to solve problems. Fantastic. Now, there are some challenges to the collaboration and energy of open source, and the challenges kind of come from what we did in the past. So, for example, we used to use patents to restrict access to technology, to restrict collaboration on the technology, to basically have a supplier-purchaser relationship. Okay? And open source completely changes what we're doing with technology. It's not so much a supplier-purchaser relationship as a community. Some people are providing services, some people are developing, some people, yeah, they're just using, they're effectively just consumers. But it's not a simple A to B. Patents used to be for the A to B path, producer-consumer. The guy who makes it, the people who buy it. Open source, it's a little bit different. So the thing is that patents are there, and they kind of come from an approach that was different to how we do things in open source. That means that patents can cause a problem for open source. They can cause an issue because they come from a position where they could restrict collaboration. And in open source technologies, in Linux, we need that collaboration to get the value. That's what we need. So what we have then is something that can cause trouble for something else. Okay, that's not a crisis. That's not a huge crisis, because in the same way that, for example, a fork can be used to share your food or to stab someone in the arm. A patent isn't necessarily a bad thing. It depends on the motivation of who's got it. What are they going to use it for? Okay. So if it exists, all right, it could be a problem, but it might not be. The key thing is the motivation of the patent owner. We still need to be concerned, but we need to be aware that the world we're living in now and the world we're living in tomorrow, it's a fascinating one, because open source came, as I said, it's the most important idea in the post-industrial era. It came and it's mainstream, but it hasn't completely replaced everything else. We're in a world that is, in fact, open and closed. It's going to be open and closed tomorrow as well. There are going to be proprietary products and open source products. There are going to be people who have patents who want to do open source, and therefore their patents are not going to be a challenge to open source. There are going to be people who have patents and don't want to do open source, and their patents can be a challenge. And there's going to be people who want to do both, and their patents may be a challenge. It's a complex world out there. It's an especially complex world for most of you who just want to make great code and want to make great products and wish that this layer of legal complexity didn't exist. That's kind of where Open Invention Network comes in. Okay, so there are big companies out there who need Linux. And these guys have got a lot of knowledge about patent affairs as well. And Open Invention Network is sort of a meeting place to bridge between the knowledge and ability of very large companies with a lot of experience in patents, with smaller companies, with projects, even with individuals. Open Invention Network, think of it this way, it's the community meeting place to try to make sure that patents do not stop the growth and the value of Linux and open source in general. So this is the kind of the big mission: enable, influence, and defend. Enable open source, influence people to understand it, and defend it if it needs to be defended. Linux, the Linux ecosystem, and by that, when I say the Linux ecosystem, I mean something Open Invention Network defends as the Linux system, about 1,800 software packages that we think are critical to everyone. We're here to protect that. We're here to make sure that that Linux system continues to give value for everyone in the future. Explaining that. This is where it's going to get boring. Bear with me. Well, one thing is enabler. How do we enable the Linux system? Basically the Linux kernel and associated packages around it that you need to make any operating system work based on Linux. How do we take care of it? Well, here's one way. Here's one way. We buy patents that are relevant to it. We buy patents that are relevant to Linux, and then we just give a license to everyone for free. So that patent no longer threatens Linux. It's a pretty simple idea, but it's a pretty good idea. The only proviso to the get a free license is you have to promise that you don't want to litigate on the core Linux system as well. So basically anyone who says, we're not going to use our patents on the Linux system, they get a free license to all of the Linux patents that we take out of the market. And that means anyone who is sincere about Linux continually increases their protection from patents that might address Linux. Everyone in the OIN community promises no aggression to each other on the Linux system. Plus, OIN buys patents outside, and we give away licenses for free. Imagine it as if it's a ceasefire. We're saying, on the Linux system, we all agree, we see value here. We're not going to litigate here. We're not going to fight here. This is where we need to collaborate, regardless of if we are a competitor or not. Okay, fair enough. You do that. So what? Well, we don't just do that. That's kind of the mechanics of everyone promising to be nice. On top of that, we sort of have to go around the world and say to people, all right, we've got a bunch of people here, companies, projects, and individuals playing nice on Linux because it has great value. Now, please take that into account with your policy decisions in government, with your industry decisions, with your standardization decisions. So Open Invention Network actually kind of goes out into the world and says to people, wherever patents and the Linux system intersect, we try to go out there and say, okay, here's what we need to do, here's why, here's how. So we go out there, we try to communicate with all types of vendors, all types of companies, we try to communicate with governments, with thought leaders. We basically try to turn up wherever there's a big conversation about Linux and open source and patents. And we try to make sure that at the very least, the Linux system is safe for everyone. So that's why you have me speaking here today. We send people all around the world to talk a lot. We write articles, we give interviews. We do little one-to-one meetings or one-to-group meetings, whatever it takes to let people know that we need to collaborate on open source, not just on code, but also on patents. And then, what happens when things go wrong? This is the fun bit for you, those of you who read things like Slashdot. Okay, so sometimes, even if you try to get everyone to agree to play nice, even if you talk to lots of people who are making policy decisions or standardization decisions, sometimes bad things happen. So that's where Open Invention Network can help defend open source technology. More specifically, we actively seek to defend the Linux system, the core system we all need. Step one, well, it's what I already said. It's where we do widespread distribution of rights throughout Linux. Translated into English, that means that we all promise if we have a patent on the Linux system, everyone else automatically gets a license in this community as long as they promise the same. So I will give you a free license, you give me a free license, Bob gets a free license too, as long as he says if he had a patent, he would give us a license. It's the distribution of rights. Everyone doing Linux who agrees to play nice. That's number one, and that's really important, but it's not enough. We also have to do more. One thing is defensive publications, and who's going to cost cut? Hands up, I'm there, come on. Come on! Who's going? Is that it? It's going to be so boring. It's like 3 people. It's pathetic. Okay. I'm going to pretend that you're just shy and that more of you are going, because at COSCUP something pretty awesome will happen. We have a guy to do defensive publication work with projects and companies. Let me explain a defensive publication. A patent is where you own an invention, or to be more accurate, the implementation of an invention. Okay? You own it, and you can charge people fees for it. Or you can give it away, whatever you want. But a patent is really expensive. A patent is expensive, and most projects could never have a patent, and most small companies could never have a patent. But many projects and many small companies invent really cool things. And sadly, in today's market, there are non-practicing entities, polite term, trolls, term I like, out there who will go and patent your inventions and then try to get you and everyone else to pay them money. Now those people kind of are not my favorite, and they shouldn't be your favorite if you do open source either. Defensive publications are a way around that. Basically, a defensive publication is a formal explanation of your invention, very similar to a patent document. And this document can be put into databases that mean that patent examiners will see it. And that means that if someone else tries to patent it, they can't. Okay, so Open Invention Network helps and pays for defensive publications, a record of invention, so that any project anywhere in the world, any small company who wants to record their invention, they can get that recorded and put into databases for free. We'll help with that. It's much cheaper for us to help with that than for us to wait until someone else patents your idea and tries to sue everyone. Defensive publication is a really cool concept. It takes a little bit of talking to understand it, so that's why at Cost Cup we're sending our defensive publication specialist here. And he will tell you about it, but he'll also sit down and do it with you for your invention and submit it so that your invention can be officially recorded and will always be safe from patenting. Makes sense, right? I think it's cool. We work with the community as well, third point. We work with the community to neutralize threats. What does that mean? Well, when something is happening, we talk with the community and we try to find a way around it. When there's a challenge to the Linux system, when there's aggression, when there's a problem, we try to talk about it and try to understand how to fix it. That's simple enough. More precisely, on the do something active front, we try to discourage negative behavior from non-practicing entities, Charles, and from aggressive companies that don't like open source. So we actively try to go out there and stop the problems before they happen. Or if they're already happening, we try to help contribute to solving them. And the last point, this is kind of cool. I'm not sure that anyone has actively used this, but if you Google or Bing or whatever you want, Linux Defenders 911, we have a specific service where if patent aggression comes to you as an individual, a project, a business, if something hits you and worries you and frightens you, come to us. Come to us right away. We're here to listen and to help you put it in context. We don't think you're a patent expert. We don't think you should need to be. Linux Defenders 911 is a way that if you are doing Linux and you have aggression against you on Linux, you can come to us and we'll help you. It's a community outreach. Make sense? Alrighty, I see at least 2 nodding heads out of 30 people. That'll do. Alright, so this is all part of a management phrase. It's part of an ecosystem of awesome people doing awesome stuff so developers don't have to. So what we have a lot of people out there trying to support the Linux ecosystem and look after it so that we can all do really cool things. Linux Foundation is where we see an awful lot of energy in trying to help support the Linux developers. But they also do a little more than just helping support the developers. They have things like the patent commons and peer-to-patent to help address some of the patent issues we see in the market. Software Freedom Law Center, for example, is another entity. It's there specifically to provide free legal support for projects doing open source who need it. That might be compliance issues. It might be patent issues. They are there to help you. And Open Invention Network, that's us. We do a lot of stuff too. So, running through our thing, we get people who do open source, who do Linux, to say, on the Linux system, we're going to agree, we will not be aggressive as long as the other guy is not aggressive. We have built a no-fly zone for aggression, a community of non-aggression with around 450 people, projects, companies in it. Okay, so for example, out of thin air, CentOS is part of our community. And obviously CentOS does not have Linux system patents. So their promise is perhaps symbolic rather than releasing a patent license in practice. But then you have large companies, like for example that little one in America we call IBM. And they definitely have patents. They've got at least 20 or 30 patents last time I looked. And they're also saying to projects like CentOS, to companies like Fujitsu, on the Linux system, no patent aggression. It's a confidence measure. Very important. And if you are a project or a company and you're not in there, why not? You promise you're not going to be aggressive on the platform we all share and we all need. It's a small step, but the more of us who do that, the safer we will all be forever. It's a very important step. So seriously, talk to me. We need you. We need your voices to protect Linux. Then we buy patents out of the market. So you might remember a couple of years ago, There was the public discussion where we bought patents from AST that potentially read on technologies like open source. We go into the market and where we think patents might read on what we all need, OIN will buy it, keep it safe, and give a free license to everyone who agrees not to be aggressive to Linux. It's a kind of a community long-term investment. Directed invention. Well, where people are going to create stuff, we help them do it. So, if people are going to create stuff and want a patent, we'll try to talk to them if it's going to be on Linux areas. We're going to try to talk to them and walk beside them so that their patent will never be a threat for Linux. Where they're going to invent something and they don't want to patent it, we're going to try to walk beside them and help them defensively publish it so no one else can patent it and use it against Linux. Simple idea, very important. One-on-one assistance to people under threat. That's a cool one. Basically, that's the kind of the Linux Defenders 911, or in a corporate sense, anyone who comes to us. If you're under threat, come to us. We have tons of knowledge, tons of experience in the field. We want to try to make sure that everyone can use Linux. We're here to help. And then there's the Linux Defenders program. Part of that I covered already, but part of it is stuff like peer-to-patent, which is where we try to make sure if there are patents, at least they will be patents that are not crazy broad and vague, higher quality. Post-issue peer-to-patents, where there are crazy, vague, and dangerous patents out there, we try to get them re-examined. Defensive publications, where you invent, you're not going to patent, you hate patents. That is entirely to your freedom, but for goodness sake, defensively publish your awesome new technology so no one else will patent it. Because you might not like patents, you might object to them and not want to touch them, but your invention can still be patented by someone else. Defensive publication prevents that. And the last item, I've already touched on it, Linux Defenders. We go and defend Linux. Quite simple, quite important. I would say, out of all of these things, I think that in the enable side, where we all agree on the Linux ecosystem, we're going to play nice. We're going to agree that if we had a patent, we would not use it against each other. That's the most important thing we do. Because just a few years ago, there were only around 60 companies and projects in our community. Now it's 450, and we're still growing really fast. The more people we get to say that, the more people we get to say, on the Linux system, patent aggression has no place, the safer the Linux system will be for everyone forever. Simple but important concept. Okay, that's the general overview of OIN. And pulling back to my first slide, freedom through collaboration and partnership. We do all of this stuff. We do all of it, I suppose, in a way that's very helpful to people who come to us. But it can also seem a little mysterious, right? I mean, Open Invention Network has big companies behind it, right? Open Invention Network is making decisions that can affect everyone using Linux, right? Yeah. It could be mysterious. It could even be scary. Except it's not. We're always out here. We're always trying to talk to everyone to try to get roadmaps for the industries like mobile and embedded. We're trying to see where the markets are going so that we can get there and protect Linux in these areas. We're talking to individual companies and projects to see what is it that they're doing, where do they need protection, and why. And we're trying by all of this outreach to get a picture of what is Linux to everyone. What is it? What are the threats? And how do we fix them? Now, I'll admit that for a lot of people, they don't see Open Invention Network every day. And that's because there aren't that many of us. There aren't that many of us, and we're a little bit limited in terms of how many events we can go to every year, how much time we can spend on each issue. Simply because Open Invention Network is a lean and efficient organization doing a lot of stuff. We're trying to get out more and talk to more people, to get more feedback, to get more energy. And we're gradually getting better at it. We're going to be spending more time in Taiwan. That's why in Cost Cup, I'll be back again, and we're also bringing the Defensive Publications guy. We're going to try and build these relationships and make them deep, because we're here permanently to look after the Linux ecosystem. Now what we need to do is to build the relationships across the whole world to do that effectively. We're not a black box. We're not doing this in isolation. We're doing it in partnership with everyone that we can. Admittedly, we're still relatively new to Taiwan. That's perhaps due to the fact that a lot of the patent tension and conflict occurred in places like the United States. So that's where traditionally a lot of our energy was. But with the Linux system so global, our energy needs to be global too. And we're learning how to do that. How to keep good personal relationships, one-to-one relationships, while talking to many more people. And I want to start that conversation today. If I haven't seen you before, come and get my card. I've got lots of them. And let's begin that one-to-one talk. The number one thing I want you to do, the number one thing I want all of you to do, as soon as possible, is to seriously consider saying that I, or my company, does not intend to ever be aggressive on the Linux system, because we think the Linux system is important. We are not going to use our patents against other companies or projects on the Linux system, providing they promise the same back. In other words, to join our community of non-aggression, where we all agree to be nice. As I say, there's 450 in there at the moment. We'd like to have 1,000 as soon as possible. Then we'd like to have 2,000, and then 3,000. We want to grow this as fast and as broadly as possible, especially in Asia. So it's awesome that companies like Fujitsu are in. It's really cool. It's great we've got LG. But we need a lot more. And particularly, personal note, I kind of come from the community side, and I would really appreciate to see a lot more projects in there. Their pledge not to be aggressive, well, symbolic. But their benefit in the protection they get in the long term, not symbolic. Remember, all of the companies in our community are promising non-aggression to those projects. So get in there. There's no reason you shouldn't. And I'm gonna take a couple of questions. I've got another 30 minutes, and we're gonna do the cool thing in a minute. I promised you, and I'll stick to it. I'm going to do that. The thing I'd like to highlight, before I sign out of the little dry bit, what does this partnership mean in terms of actual results, right? What does it mean in actual results? If I talk to Open Invention Network, will something awesome happen that changes my life forever in a good way? Well, maybe. We are expanding the amount of protection that we provide to the global community. This year, for the first time since Open Invention Network was founded in 2005, we increased the Linux system definition. We used to have around 1,100 software packages in our definition, basically the Linux kernel plus a lot of other stuff that's needed to make an operating system. This year we expanded it by 741 more packages. We now have around 1,800 packages in the Linux system. And we expanded it particularly in areas where we see Linux growing and concerns growing. So, for example, mobile and embedded. So we put a lot more mobile and embedded technology into the Linux system definition that we use. In practice, that means there's a lot more technology that we are actively saying we want protected, we want everyone to be increasingly safe and confident to use. Mobile and embedded Linux is here to stay. Mobile and embedded Linux is important to everyone. Mobile and embedded Linux will be protected. So that's what we do. We learn about the new areas, and we gradually work out where's the common ground, how much protection can we give now, how much can we give tomorrow, how will we get there, how will we do that. We're expanding the Linux system definition. We will expand it again in the future. We will continue to keep the growth of Linux supported and as free as possible. Now, you have a choice. Do you want to ask me a question about anything I have just said? No. No. Good. No, it's good. No, it's seriously, it's good because I wanted to show you something cool. And the cool thing is something that I'm doing in collaboration with about 30 people around the world. This cool thing, indirectly, completely relies on organizations like Open Invention Network for working in the long term. Because we're doing a project for disaster relief, and let me pull it up here. We're doing a project for disaster relief. Oops, it is. How do you do a slideshow? Oh, there we go. A project for disaster relief that uses open hardware, open source software. It goes into a lot of areas that are challenged. A project that's very broad, and in itself, joining, let's say, the Open Invention Network community, it couldn't provide complete protection against patent threats. Nothing can. But on the Linux system, it meant we could kind of go, okay, on the Linux system, we are totally way safer and we can breathe a sigh of relief, and we have a huge partner if we ever have a problem on the Linux system. And that was tremendously important in building a new project this big and this complex. But the project is awesome, and I wanted to tell you about it because this type of awesome only happens when you have open source and when you have organizations like Open Invention Network helping to get your back, to support you, to do awesome things. It's about a robot aeroplane to save lives. I'm not kidding. So last year, I was part of the Japanese disaster relief efforts. And as you know, we had quite a serious situation in Japan. Around 20,000 people died. Part of the immediate recovery effort that I contributed to was in trouble because we couldn't see what was going on. We couldn't get to people in time. So you have to cut through the uncertainty and the fog, right? To work out who's in trouble, how do you get to them, how do you save them? So we thought, and when I say we, I mean a bunch of people from the Linux ecosystem thought, well, hey, surely we have technology, we have the ability to see through the uncertainty, to see through the fog, to try to get to people quicker, right? So what we thought was, we want to create ways to get to the disaster teams on the ground the information they need to save people faster. Simple concept, simple idea. And ancillary to this, very important. I don't know how many of you saw the news in Japan last year, but I can tell you because I personally experienced it, not with this ship, that's a big ship, with much smaller things. Trying to get supplies into the disaster zone, we often send supplies to a particular area, and we found out that they already had the supplies that we were sending, and another place needed them, but we didn't know where the other place was. In other words, we couldn't see what was going on, and we couldn't plan how to deliver the equipment we had. There was a lot of wasted energy. So we're going to solve that with a robot aeroplane. We figured that the obvious solution was to build an artificially intelligent robot to do the seeing for us, to go into disaster zones, to investigate, and to map. It's totally awesome, but it's also totally practical. Bear with me. So, what we decided to do was to create a technology that you could drive up to any disaster zone. It could take off from something as small as a footpath. It can recognize roads, people, and smoke. It can photograph, film, and map the landscape, and it can do things like work with sensors to measure weather, radiation, and other things like chemical spills. Ambitious concept. Yeah, let me show you it in action, because it isn't just a concept. Here it is recognizing roads. See that? That is the artificial intelligence recognizing a road. Hook that into OpenStreetMap, it will rewrite your map to tell you what's there now. Here it is recognizing people in the test phase. We actually only need 12 pixels of data to recognize a human at the moment. So it can be up in the air. There it is recognizing smoke. Now, that's built on OpenCV on top of Linux. That's components that we're all really familiar with. It's kind of like Matthew's work. On top of that, we build this, because he did all the boring work first. Thank you, Matthew. So on top of open source, we're able to build all of these cool technologies. And we do that in a very simple way, with a credit card and Alibaba.com. No, seriously, a lot of it is off the shelf. You can buy an awful lot of things off the shelf. And we have incredible technologies, not just in open source software like the Linux kernel, but open hardware now too. The open hardware includes the computer, the autopilot, these type of things. Lots of open hardware, or at least partially open hardware. And lots of glue. The components that put this together are not sophisticated. Quite frankly, these are very simple components. This can be built by anyone in the world with glue, a screwdriver, and some wire, plus the list of components. It's quite astonishing, actually. It's impressive stuff. The build time is about 4 hours if you build it yourself. You build a robot like this. Maybe 8 hours if you're clumsy or you're me. Okay, stop flipping images. I need to stop. It's nearly done. Bear with me. You've got to know, quit that flipping button. Yeah. But the point, ooh, there it is. That's drone 2. That's the Japanese drone. Let me pull you back to her. Oh, God, it's going to do it again. The red drone you saw. Yeah, this is not what I wanted. The red drone that you're going to see again in 1 second is one of 2 robots that are completed. And that's drone 2, the Japanese drone. Drone 1 is in the United Kingdom. Drone 3 is preparing assembly in Australia because we want to test in different heat, humidity, and environmental conditions. I mentioned at the beginning of the talk we have like 30 people doing this. These people are all over the world. The advantage is that we can test stuff all over the world. The disadvantage is that most of us have never met each other. Well, that was the Japanese drone, and it's made out of really simple stuff. The airframe, it's fiberglass and balsa wood. It's basically a high-end RC, high-end toy airframe. Now that's our prototyping airframe. We're actually in development for something really cool. I'll get to that in 2 minutes. But this airframe, it's 2 meters, about 2 to 3 kilos, and it can fly somewhere in the region of 20 to 30 minutes. The system itself, Autopilot Mega, that's something which you might be aware of if you're in the open source community and are anyway interested in aviation. It's open software, open hardware, autopilot. We're using a Sony sensor for the camera, but the camera, it's unremarkable. It's sourced from China. It's a door security camera. It costs $40. Arduino sensors, Raspberry Pi, and Debian-based operating system to do all the thinking. So that's the autopilot. Kind of awesome stuff. This autopilot, anyone can buy it. Open hardware, open software, schematics available. Look at that, 600 3D waypoints. That's the level of pro technology just a couple of years ago. It's got a black box. It can reboot itself in midair if it freezes. Insane. Camera module, it's a door camera. Nothing special. Incredibly boring. That's the point. The computer, it's a Raspberry Pi. It's almost a joke of a computer. Yet it can do this stuff. It's a $35 computer that can see roads, people, and smoke and help you remap a disaster zone. That's awesome. The software, well, essentially Debian 6-based software and OpenCV. Linux is at the heart of this technology. Linux is the thing that's necessary for this technology to function. And custom stuff, very little. Mostly it's the smoke, roads, and people. It's all about the visuals. And that, of course, is all released under the same license as OpenCV. We've even invented completely new technology based on really old technology. I said sensors earlier, right? So we thought, well, what do we need? And then we thought, well, Fukushima, radiation sensor would be good, or lots of them. So we decided we needed a radiation sensor to talk with the robots. And we looked at existing sensors like a Geiger counter. And you know how a Geiger counter works? It energizes a tube with quite a bit of energy to check radiation, right? It uses a lot of power. We thought, what if we had an ionization chamber that didn't use any energy at all? It just used a reference voltage from a battery, but didn't draw from it. So we built one in a jam jar, actually, because my engineer has a sense of humor. We built a radiation sensor that in its detection chamber draws no current. The only thing drawing current on that is the Arduino-based nanode. That's the engineer, Andrew Back. He looks sensible, but he's completely mad. He builds stuff like that, and he did. And that radiation sensor, I think it's magic. I think it's magic. A couple of batteries that'll run for weeks and broadcast up to ½ a kilometer in the air so a passing robot can read it or ask it for backlogs of what it's seen in those weeks. Phenomenal. And it costs like $40. All of that, robot aircraft, crazy sensors, all of it ties together, again, based around very simple technology, a laptop running Linux. Running on top of that, Mission Control, which is just an app running on Mono, and stuff like VLC Player. And then it just outputs GIS data, the geographic aware data. I saw this here, this road is there, this has changed. It outputs that data in a format that automatically goes into disaster management systems like Sahana Eden, which the Red Cross uses. It's that simple. We tie it together with a marketing graphic like this and magic, you're done. You simply launch the planes, you have the sensors, and they tell you what just happened, and they help you get there faster. It's cool because it can tell you what's on the ground and what's changed. It can use stuff like OpenStreetMap, and we're actually just beginning a collaboration with OpenStreetMap Japan to get this turnkey to recreate your maps based on what these technologies see. And it can basically work, slot right into existing processes to solve problems like that. It's a very cool thing. It just got launched. It was launched on the 8th in Yokohama in LinuxCon Japan 2012. We just announced it. And we're rapidly moving. From now until December, we'll finish prototyping December. All the schematics, all the data, all the bill of materials necessary for anyone in the world to buy it or to go into full-scale production if they're a company will be available. It's that simple. You're welcome too. Everyone's welcome. It's an open source project. It's crowdsourcing, I say. Some people say don't say crowdsourcing. I never listen. I say crowdsourcing. It's all about the people. It's about the people, their minds, solving problems. From development to improvement to deployment. It's all about the people. And that's how we create these incredible technologies. So the Open Relief project, quite frankly, it's a super glue project. We glue together awesome technologies created by awesome, intelligent people to solve a problem. In this case, how do we see people faster so we can save their life next time this happens? When next time we have a tsunami, next time we have an earthquake, how do we get to them faster? We're answering that using the incredible technologies built by open source communities. We're building a community to tie together the various components, the open hardware, the open source software, test, refine, and explain it to the world. Simple concept. We've got an ecosystem because everyone has an ecosystem slide. My company, Open Dawn, we've got CodeThink in the UK, Toradex, who gave us 4 Tegra 2 processors to do visual recognition, Nanode, who gave us sensors to build magical radiation detectors, and a little traditional shop called Phil's, which sold us all the wires necessary to make an artificial intelligent robot. Phil's in Newcastle. He rocks. That man knows his stuff. And we need technologists, we need professional disaster relief people, we need commercial enterprises to go and make products. And everyone can be part of it. No matter what you do something that's desperately needed. It's an open project, and it needs a lot of brains to solve these problems because we're dealing with enormous problems. And even the simplest possible solution we can make, like an ionization radiation detection unit which allows you to know if something has gone horribly wrong, even that, it needs a lot of refining to have it ready by December. So we need people to join in, we need people to lend a hand, we need a lot of support, and you can get the tools. We're pushing all the stuff out now. I'm slow because my OpenCV guy in New Zealand hasn't emailed me the code, and he doesn't use Gitorious. But anyway, all of the code is going onto Gitorious. All of the schematics are going onto SolderPad. And if you don't see something there yet, that's because we still haven't got around to putting it on, but it's coming. The whole thing. You can find us on all of the cool websites, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, whatever you like. Search for Open Relief, you'll have us. We're the only one. It's like a unique phrase. We should patent and trademark it. And the airframe. I mentioned a bit ago that we're actually building an open source airframe, well, open hardware airframe. We bought a prototyping airframe from China. It was very interesting. We're learning a lot. Our first 2 robots use it. But quite frankly, in a disaster situation, it's not really tough enough. It's not really durable enough. It's not really flexible enough. So we're learning from that, and we're currently in prototyping to release the complete airframe, and you see a model of it there, for December. We actually have a manufacturer doing free prototyping for us to make sure that the component parts, as we form them, will work as expected. That whole thing is going to be basically an end-to-end open source software, open hardware, disaster relief, artificial intelligent robot that can talk to really amazing sensors like that magical radiation thing on the ground. And that's building on the shoulders of giants. That's a really, I guess, a typical open source project. Open Relief is simply building on what people like Carl Velte, people like Matthew have done. We're taking lots of technology lying around there, and on top of that, we're solving a problem. We're putting it together, we're solving the problem. Like I said, organizations like Open Invention Network are critical for projects like this. You can imagine the budget of this project. It's like zero. There is no budget. So the first time that we run into a patent thread, we're in serious trouble. When it comes to the Linux system, I said that's at the heart. It's at the heart of everything. It's at the heart of the robot. It's at the heart of the mission control system. Everything depends on Linux. Being part of the Open Invention Network community, that gives a great deal of confidence. It means that not only do we have a lot of companies that simply say we're never going to be aggressive, we also have the ability to get support from Open Invention Network where needed. Very simple, very cool measure. And now I'm taking away the cool thing. No more cool thing. Enough of the cool thing. We're going back to the legal thing. Tough luck. But that's it, in a nutshell. That kind of really awesome technology, that kind of really insanely cool stuff, it only happens because you're building on technologies created around the world by thousands of people, and because you've got support throughout the Linux ecosystem. Remember, yeah, there we go. When I said there were organizations doing a lot of the boring stuff so that developers and projects don't have to, I was serious. Linux Foundation, Software Freedom Law Center, Open Invention Network, these are extremely targeted, extremely knowledgeable, extremely capable organizations taking care of stuff that we need to take care of, but that our individual projects might not be able to. OIN takes care of the patent matters. Software Freedom Law Center, well, especially copyright matters. Linux Foundation, wide amount of stuff, but let's call them the industry collaboration organization. They help you on standards, they help you on understanding where development is going, they help you on a lot of the business strategy. They help you on the project strategy too. So these type of organizations, I believe, are very important now that Linux is mainstream. We can have our cool projects, we can have our cool hacking, we can have our astonishing results. We can also have our security in a way that we could never have if open source didn't exist. And if this collaboration didn't exist, the collaboration is about way more than code. This is end-to-end collaboration on everything about Linux. Open Invention Network, it's about the patents, and it's awesome. And you should be part of it, and you should be promising that you're not going to be aggressive on Linux. And if you ever face a threat, you should immediately come for help and advice and support and a hug. Okay, we don't give hugs. We don't. But that's it. Open Invention Network, awesome. Open Relief, able to be done because people like Harold and Matthew do lots of coding, awesome. And one more awesome, there we go. Look, Open Relief's website went into Chinese. But I can't see it because I can't scroll. There we go. Yeah. Lucian did that like at 4 a.m. at night 3 days ago. So you can find out about the cool project in traditional Chinese. Okay. But
so what's the original language? English?
Of course English. Yeah.
You're in Japan.
I know, but my Japanese is like really dumb child dropped on its head level. Which reminds me, you know, I have to give a full 1-hour speech in Japanese next month, and I still haven't written it. It's going to be a very interesting month. Anyway, yes, no, original language, English. But website, we have English, Japanese, Korean, and traditional Chinese so far. And we have more coming online. Because of the community around the world. Because everyone who's interested contributes a translation or knowledge about how to see people. Whatever, their own thing. That's the community. So, all of that, cool stuff. Open Relief, search for it in Google. You'll find us as #1 hit. All of that happens because of things like OIN. And everyone who promises they're not going to be aggressive on patents, that takes another level of security into the amazing Linux ecosystem. I would love for you to think about these things. I'd love for you to actually make a non-aggression pledge. And I'd love for you to know that there's someone here to protect you if there's aggression around you on the Linux system. Important message, you're not alone. This is a community. We're here to help as much as possible. All right, I'm going to throw the floor open for questions. Does anyone have a question? Utter silence. Oh, Matthew, hi.
If nobody has a question, will you go on to talk about even cooler stuff?
Flying robot plane is not enough for you here. No, I'm sorry. All I've got today is a flying robot plane that can recognize people smoking roads. Give me another week. I'll be back with something even better. Yeah, no, sorry. That's it for my cool. Apologies. Does anyone have a question about something that isn't cool? Alrighty, I have a question on to the left here.
I'm just curious, where to buy the t-shirt?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I was up like at 4 a.m. and we were about 2 weeks before the conference, and I realized that you're not a real project unless you've got a t-shirt. Forget about the code. The code is irrelevant. You need one of these, okay? And I actually was really concerned. My developers were not so concerned. They were like, what? You're a marketing freak? But yeah, it was Zazzle.com. And I go click, 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 ooh. And then they charged me way too many dollars. And then they sent me a t-shirt from the United States. But it's expensive. It's like $23 for a t-shirt on Zazzle.com. And the shipping is $7. That's too much money for a t-shirt. Cotton is too thin. I should buy local. I know that. That's your answer. And we'll have them on the Open Relief website soon, if you really want one. Alrighty, any other questions? Utter silence. Well, I hope you've enjoyed talking about patents. I hope you've enjoyed talking about robot aeroplanes. And I hope that you will seriously come and work with Open Invention Network to make Linux safer and safer on the patent front. Because we do need to address this. We can't ignore it. Whether you love patents or hate patents, if you're here and you do Linux, we need to take care of the patent concern. We need to make sure that patents do not threaten Linux. We have to make sure that all the people who are positive about Linux will agree that they're not going to be aggressive. And we have to make sure that all of the people who are negative about Linux cannot approach us and isolate us. We are a community. We need to work together on this. If we do that, we keep growing and have crazy cool things like the robot aeroplane. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.